So for today's yin class, let's have two blocks if you have them. And if you don't, it's fine. Also a bolster or two folded beach towels or even a couple of blankets if you've got those folded in about that shape. Also pillows work too. So the bigger the better, like a king size bed pillow would work, or maybe just a couple of flat pillows stacked. And you may not even need them, just telling you now. So um, you have them in case you want them. All right, so today we'll start facing the side of the mat. So you want to face the side, doesn't matter which side, whichever one you can see the screen. Bring the hands back behind you so you're sitting reclined. And then you want to take a wider stance with the feet. So definitely wider than hip width. And as you sit back, keep it all reclined. You'll just bring the knees over to one side and then over to the other. So we're starting with some movement today. We're going to go back and forth side to side, well, we'll keep it slow. I'll just get slower from here. This is about as fast as this class is going to get, which is a good thing. So as you go side to side, this is a great way to warm up the hips, especially if they're really tight or you're getting ready to do a whole lot of movement. It's a nice way to get into them. So when you bring the knees over to one side, you're opening up each hip in a different way. So one hip will be externally rotated and the other hip will be internally rotated. And if you feel like you need to spend a little bit more time on one side, that's fine. You can stay there, but just know we will end up spending a whole lot of time on one side and then we'll move it over to the other. So today's practice will be starting with the hips and the lower body, the legs, and work our way up the body. And for a lot of us, once we relax the hips, the whole body starts to relax a bunch. So that may be you. But it's nice to change things up with our practice and start in different areas before we focus. All right, so next time the knees end up over to the right, stay there. And now you're just working the knees down toward the mat. They don't have to touch, but you're just getting that nice opening in the hips. Hands are still back behind you and you're leaning back. But now we're going to start to walk the hands up. So legs stay the same. Left hand comes forward between the legs. So now we'll check the legs. You want this left hip to be in line with the left knee in line with the left hip, right knee in line with the right hip. And you'll start to turn the face forward. So the legs are, we call this 90-90 or deer pose in yin. So the front leg is in this 90-degree angle, heel in line with the knee as best as we can get it. And then if you look at the left knee, that left heel is right underneath it. And it doesn't have to be perfect, so you just find yours. Come up onto the fingertips, sit up pretty tall. And you may be feeling a nice hip opening here. That left hip is most likely lifted for all of us. That's fine. You are trying to get it down toward the mat. So if you're leaning way over to the right, that's fine too. You can keep the hands there. Close the eyes, start to come to the breath. So take a deep breath in through the nose, back out through the nose. Two more like that. Big breath in. Slow breath out. Deep breath in through the nose. Slowly back out through the nose. Keep going on your own. Feeling yourself start to settle into this shape. Keeping the chest going forward, although if you're leaning way over to the right, that's fine. You can stay there. Staying away from your edge, finding some ease in the pose, and being gentle with yourself, especially with these longer holds. If you're feeling pretty good where you are and you want a little bit more, you could start to lean forward over that right hip, just walking the hands forward. Maybe the chest comes down a little bit lower. You want to stay in the hips. So if you feel like you're coming out of the hips, then maybe push back a little bit. So find that balance. Head and neck can go down toward the mat, just finding that release. Eyes can stay closed. And if you've got to a place where it's become too intense, then just bring the chest back up. You are putting more weight on that right hip as you lean forward. And if you're leaning forward, start to walk the hands back in, bringing the chest up, left hand between the right leg and the left leg, and then bring that left hand back behind you, bringing the knees back up to center. So back to where we started. Here's where you want your blanket, towels, bolster. So grab that, just bring it over to the side of the mat. I'm going to use my bolster and come back to where we were. So bolster or blanket right in front of you, hands back behind you, knees bent. Bring both knees over to the right again. So just back to where we were. Left hand comes forward just between the legs. And then from here, this left leg can come back. We're coming into single pigeon, or what we call sleeping swan and yin. Right knee comes outside of the torso, and the right foot can come back a little bit toward that left hip. You want to keep it an easy single pigeon. Here's where the blanket or the bolster comes into play. You take it the wide way and you slide it underneath the hips, and it props the hips up enough so that you can square the hips a little bit better and gives you a whole lot more support. If you feel like you don't need it and it's taking away from your hip opening, you can skip it. You can also put a block underneath that right hip if it's lifted and you don't have anything else. So from here, walk the hands up or back toward the body, lifting the chest, square the hips, back toes, big toes pointing straight back behind you. And then you can start to come forward into the pose. Again, putting more weight onto that right hip. If you feel anything in that right knee, come out of it. So sometimes this pose doesn't work in all bodies, and that's okay. We know this one can be a troublemaker for some of us. If that's the case, come back up onto the hands, come back to seated, set that bolster off to the side. You'll come onto your back, right knee, right ankle, left thigh, and you're coming into thread the needle. You can either hang on to the left thigh and bring that in, or just rest the sole of the left foot onto the mat and stay here working that right knee away from you. It's the same hip opening. You're just not putting so much weight onto that right hip, and it gives the knee a break. If you're good in sleeping swan, single pigeon, then stay there. Feeling that support underneath the hips, you can start to let the hips become a little bit heavier. Another nice way to support the pose if you're in sleeping swan is if you do have a block, you can bring it underneath the chest, the head, fill in any of those gaps. I love the chest. It works in my body. Try it if it feels like it makes sense in yours. And then just resting the head down on something. It doesn't have to be the ground or the mat. It can be up a whole lot higher with blocks. But the idea when we're in this sleeping swan single pigeon pose is to keep those hips level. And that can be difficult to do without support. And if you're in sleeping swan, single pigeon, start to walk the hands in, lifting the chest. And if there's anything underneath the upper body, just set that off to the side so it's out of the way. Left knee will come in a little bit so you can remove whatever's underneath the hip, setting it off to the side. And then from here, come back to sleeping swan. That right knee will go more forward, so it's right in front of the chest. And then you'll lean over to the right hip. Left leg comes forward and you're coming into shoelace. So you're bringing that left knee on top of the right knee. So different hip opening, but still staying in the same family. So right knee underneath the left knee. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You're working towards stacking it. Feet can be out or they can be close into the body. See which one feels better for you. Sit up nice and tall, and then you can start to lean forward, coming forward, closing the eyes, and folding in. If you're on your back and thread the needle and this pose works for you, you can come forward to seated, bringing the left knee on top of the right knee. Meeting us here. And a couple other options with this pose, if this isn't working for whatever reason, you can extend the right leg forward and just do half of it. So half shoelace and come forward that way. And if both of those aren't working, then you can bring the sole of the left foot inside the right leg and fold forward that way. And one other option I just thought of, sometimes it's just the hips coming down to the mat. So you could prop the hips up and keep the legs, and you can prop the hips up on a block, a bolster, anything else. That also brings ease into the pose. Always taking that time to listen to our bodies, figuring out what it needs and when it doesn't need. You might start to find yourself falling deeper into the pose without any effort. That is the goal of our yin practice, to go part of the way into poses. And then just allow the body to pull us in a little deeper once it gets comfortable with the shape. You'll start to walk the hands in, lifting the chest up. If you have both legs bent, you'll start to extend that left leg forward and back behind you. So coming back to 90-90, or a loose version of 90-90. So we're all coming back to this: right knee forward, left knee out to the side. Left hand comes back behind you and lift the knees up, feet wide. And then we'll just go side to side like windshield wipers, just the way we started. Feeling if there's a difference in one side versus the other with the hips, maybe even the legs. We'll do everything we just did on the other side. Same part of the sequence, just evening it out. And next time the knees come over to the left, we stay there. Just keep the hands back behind you. See how this is feeling with the hands back. You can always stay here too if it's too intense to come forward. If you feel okay with coming forward, this right hand's going to come forward right between the legs. And you square the chest forward. You might be leaning way over to the left. That's fine. If this is your 90-90 deer pose, then stay there. If you feel like you can sit upright, then try that without too much effort. And we're here in our deer pose. Close the eyes. Let's take some deep breaths here together. Take a deep breath in through the nose. Back out through the nose. Slow, deep breath in through the nose, feeling the breath go up through the crown of the head, wherever you are. And slowly back down, letting those hips come a little closer to the mat without much effort. Last one together. Big breath in. Slowly exhale back out through the nose. Keep going on your own. So big pose with the hips. The breath is so helpful here. Telling your body it's okay. Your hips are fine in a safe place. And you're in control with how deep you take this. If you're good where you are, stay where you are. If you'd like to go a little bit further, you could start to walk the hands forward, leaning forward over this left hip. If you're leaning forward, we'll start to bring the chest back up. Use the hands to get there. Walking the hands back. So right hand between the legs, sitting up tall. And if you have this bolster that you use for single pigeon still available, stay there. If it's too far away from you, you need to reach for it. Come back to that windshield wiper, the knees up, grab your bolster, and then bring the knees over to the left. So right leg comes back. Left foot can come in toward the body. You don't want to go for the deepest single pigeon. Grab the bolster or whatever you're using, lift the hips up, slide it underneath you. So it's all the way underneath the hips. Hips are resting on the bolster. And then walk the hands in. Keep pointing those right big toes back behind you, and you're lifting the chest. So this helps you square the hips forward. And once you find center, maybe you start to walk the hands forward, coming down onto the forearms or whatever seems to make the most sense. And if single pigeon isn't working, sleeping swan, then you come onto your back and you do thread the needle, left ankle on top of the right thigh. Let the head and the neck go and start to fall back in. So a couple of different levers in this pose. The closer that left foot is to the right hip, the less intense this is. In a flow class, sometimes we're asking for that foot to be forward as much as the body will allow. Here, we're not. We're trying to find a gentle sleeping pigeon. So that's one of your levers. Left knee outside of the torso is what helps you get into that hip. But some of us, it's difficult to do that. So the left knee might be more underneath the chest. That's fine if you're getting a hip opening, but if you're not, then maybe consider coming onto your back for thread the needle. And as you stay even on the hips, so not leaning too far over or being heavier on the left hip. That support underneath you keeps things even and level. And if you feel anything in that left knee, you come onto your back for thread the needle. I don't teach this pose a whole lot because so many people struggle with it, but also the people that don't really love it. So we're sprinkling it in today. And we'll start to lift the chest if you're forward in sleeping swan, coming up onto the hands. And you'll tuck the back toes, lift the hips up enough so you can slide whatever's underneath you out to the side. You'll sit onto that left hip, bring the right foot forward. And this left knee, if you had it way out to the side, just bring it so it's pointing straight forward in front of you, and then walk the right foot over to the left. And you're bringing the right knee on top of the left knee, coming into your shoelace. So same thing we did on the first side. And then from here, get yourself comfortable. You could sit up on something and bring the hips up with a block or a bolster if you're fine. You could also extend that left leg, the bottom leg forward if it's too much on the knees to have both legs bent. And then you always have the option of bringing the sole, the right foot inside of the left leg too. All right. So from here, you can start to walk the hands forward. Make sure both hips are even underneath you, whatever they're touching. Close the eyes. And it's up to you how much weight you put on the hip. So listen to the knees, especially here. This isn't great for everybody's knees either. But for some of us, we don't feel anything and it's fine. So coming into your shoelace pose or some variation of it, one of the modifications, starting to settle in. And being okay with if you had to do something different on one side versus the other, that's common too. You'll start to walk the hands in, coming back up to seated, hands back behind you. And you'll just bring this top leg, the right leg, out to the right, coming into a really gentle 90-90. And then bring the hands back behind you and the knees up. So back to where we started. If you shifted off of your mat, just scoot back so the feet are on the mat, and you'll just bring the knees side to side again. So windshield wipers to counter pose. All of those big hip openings. So a lot of leg work there. Then we'll come back to seated forward on your mat. So whichever direction that is, come to seated forward, sitting straight forward, have the bolster nearby or whatever you're using for that. And this will feel pretty good. So have the legs extended out in front of you, reach the arms all the way up, and you'll just fold forward over the legs. So rounding of the spine is okay here. You're not trying to reach as far forward as you can. Keep a nice bend in the arms. You could even turn the palms to face up, which is a nice way to not reach for anything. You could have a bend in the knees, so maybe they're moving away from the mat. You could take a block, you could stick it between the calves and maybe build something so that you can rest the forehead down onto the blocks. And if you feel like you're holding the legs anywhere, start to relax, release that. The toes are pointing straight up, let them relax. So the feet are soft, nothing's really working. You're just folding forward as gently as possible. You'll start to bring yourself back up. Use the hands. If you have anything in front of you, set it off to the side. And we'll come to an easy cross-legged seat. Really, any seat that's comfortable. Easy cross-legged works great. Your hips are pretty open, so it might be a little easier. And you could prop yourself up on a block if you want to. I'll just turn to face you a little bit more. So from here, bring the arms out by the sides, fingertips out by the sides, and bring the chin down toward the chest. So chest is open, shoulders down the back, chin's coming down toward the chest, and then bring the right ear over toward the right shoulder. So you start to get some length in the whole left side of the neck. And then really light, take the right hand and rest it as light as you can on top of the head, adding a little bit more weight onto this neck stretch. Pressing down into both hips, left shoulder moving away from the left ear. You could reach that left arm out away from you and then turn the palm to face behind you and wrap the right arm behind the back. So it just adds a little bit more length on the right side or the left side of the neck. Breathing in and out through the nose, up and down the back of the throat. And if it's too much with that left arm behind the back, you can just bring it right back to where it was. And you'll start to take this right hand back down to the mat. Keep everything else the same. Right fingertips come out to the side, shoulders still away from the ears. Still in the neck stretch, still have that half bind with the arm behind the back. And slowly release that left arm out to the side. Fingertips come down to the mat. Chin comes down toward the chest. Stay here. So notice if the left side of the neck feels longer than the right. Shoulders still going down the back a little bit, so they're not coming forward. Then we'll start to switch sides. So bring the left ear over toward the left shoulder. Stay there. Get as long as you can in the right side of the neck without changing anything. Left fingertips start to get light. Lightly bring that left hand, resting it on the head as light as you possibly can. Adding a little bit more if it works. You know you can bring that left hand down if it doesn't. Right shoulder still moving away from the ear. Reach away from the mat with that right hand, palm facing behind you. Wrap the right arm behind the back, helping the shoulder stay away from the ear, getting into that shoulder and right side chest a little bit more. And that half bind is as easy as you need it to be. So don't feel like you need to reach way far over. Find a place where you can kind of hook the hand a little bit, keep the shoulder in place without a whole lot of effort. And whenever you need a break, you take one. And while you're in the pose, try to stay with those elongated breaths in and out through the nose, moving the breath throughout the whole body. Slowly start to bring that right hand back out to the side, fingertips down on the mat. Left hand slowly makes its way back down to the ground or the mat underneath you. Keep the head going to the side. See if there's any more length in the right side of the neck. And start to bring the chin back down toward the chest, staying here with the eyes closed, shoulders moving down the back, chest being as wide as you can get it. Feeling all that length in the back side of the neck. And then bring the head back up to center. Eyes can stay closed. Sitting up tall, rising up through the crown of the head. Start to blink open the eyes. Use the hands to bring the knees back together. And you'll grab your blocks. So you'll need 2 for this. I'll give you an option if you don't have 2. I'm going to turn around because I think it'll be easier for you to see, but you can stay whatever direction you feel is best. So this first block that's closest to the body is going to go on the medium height. So the block has the lowest height, medium height, tallest height. Medium height, the widest way. And the other block's going to go on the tallest height behind that one. And you want about 1.5 feet between each block, between the 2 blocks, and then between you and the block. So you'll turn around once you have that set up, and maybe watch me first. I'll show you how to come in and how to come out, and then I'll talk you back into it again. My legs are bent, feet are on the mat. I come down onto the forearms, and I'm trying to get this first block, the very edge of it that's close to me, to touch the bottom tips of the shoulder blades. So it's down pretty far. It's away from the tops of my shoulders. Once I lean back and the chest opens, I grab this other block and bring it behind the head, the part of the skull that sticks out. And that's my headrest. And then I can bring the arms down by the sides and rest in the pose. To come out, forearms come down to the mat. I lift the head, and then I can lean over to one side, set the blocks off to the side, or I can walk the hands all the way up. So we'll all start together. 2 blocks back behind you. This block can always go lower if you wanted to. This one can too. You can also put a blanket on top of this block if it's too stiff underneath you. Come down onto the forearms with the blocks behind you. First one closest to you, get that underneath the bottom tips of the shoulder blades. So closer to the mid back and away from the shoulders. And then as you get that space open, the front of the chest, grab the other block, the tallest one, with both hands, get it right underneath the head. And you might need to move it around a little bit. Arms come down by the sides. Once you have it, palms face up. So now you're in a back bend, but the blocks are doing all the work. And you want to feel like the center of the chest is lifting up high and spreading wide just because of the work with the block underneath the back. Close the eyes, start to settle in. So with the legs bent and the feet on the mat is the most relaxing way to keep the legs, so you can just focus on the upper body. If you're feeling pretty comfortable and you want to relax even more, you could extend the legs out in front of you. We've already done a whole lot of leg work, hip opening. So just let the legs not do anything, but just lay there in front of you. If you feel like you can't keep the lower back long with the legs out in front of you, then that's your cue to bring the feet back in. And another relaxing way to keep the legs is feet out wide, knees touching. So knocking together. So some of those should work. If you don't have any blocks or this shape is just not working for you at all, then I'll give you another option. If you're good where you are, stay where you are. Setting the block. So if you don't have blocks, another option is coming to hands and knees, bringing the forearms out in front of you and resting the head down onto the mat, hips right over the knees. So melting heart pose. Still a really great back bend, heart opener. And you'll stay there if that's where you feel like you're getting your best opening for whatever reason. You don't have blocks, or this is just not comfortable enough to be in for a longer period of time. Now we're sending the breath to the upper body, trying to create some space and freedom there. If you're on your back with the blocks underneath you, if the legs are out extended in front of you, just start to walk the feet in, bending the knees. And if you're on hands and knees with the hands down on the mat and the knees on the mat, you'll just start to come back up to seated. If you're on the blocks, bring the forearms down to the mat, press into the forearms to lift the head first, and then lean over to one side so that you can take the blocks out with the other hand and set them off to the side. And we'll all come to lying down on the mat. So once you take those blocks off to the side, lie the head, upper body down onto the mat, extend the legs out in front of you, and you'll just close the eyes, feeling that sensation of the body shifting back into place. So you did all that work with just lying on the blocks and not a whole lot of effort. And now this is where you can start to feel all that space you just made. Allowing the spine to settle a little bit longer, last several breaths here before we move on. So you'll start to walk the feet in, bending the legs, soles of the feet are on the mat. Scoot the hips over to the right and bring the knees over to the left. So now we're coming into an easy spinal twist after that back bend. If you're feeling any tenderness in the lower back, take a block, a blanket, a bolster, slide it between the thighs near the knees, and reach that right arm back behind you, whatever, regardless of what you did with the legs. And then you can just let the head naturally fall wherever it wants to go. Maybe it's to the right, maybe it's pointing up a little bit more. Close the eyes and start to settle into your spinal twists. So we did that back bend. Now we're twisting the spine gently. Last few breaths here. You'll start to roll the head back to center. Use the feet to find center on your back. So coming back to bent legs, soles of the feet on the mat. And we'll do a counter pose before we come into the twist on the other side. Bring the knees in so you can rest each hand on each knee. Keep the knees and the feet together and just start to move the knees around in a circle. Keeping the knees together, you're just feeling the hips move around onto the mat. And then switch the direction of the circle. So go the other way with those circles. Then set the feet back down onto the mat. This time, scoot the hips over to the left, knees come over to the right. Block if you want one between the thighs or whatever you have, bolster, blanket, doesn't have to be a block. Just creating some space between the legs gives the lower back a little bit more space. Left arm reaches back behind you, and you're coming into the twist on this side as gently as possible. You're here for some time. Give yourself some space to fall deeper if you want to by not going all the way in from the very, very beginning. We'll start to find our way back to center, bringing the head back up, bringing the feet back down to the mat, and bringing the knees in toward the chest. Same counter pose. Hang on to both knees. Keep the knees and the feet together. Pick a direction. Take some circles going in that direction. And it may not feel like it's that big of a circle. You're just moving the hips around on the mat. Switch the direction of the circles, go the other way. Keeping it all even. Then bring the knees in toward the chest, close the eyes, take a big breath in through the nose, hold it at the very top. And on the exhale, sigh out the mouth, Shavasana. Extend the legs out in front of you, arms down by the sides, eyes stay closed. And now you just stay here. So feeling those poses, still working through the body, feeling how different the body feels after going through such a deep practice. And finding some comfort lying down flat without any props. If you're using props, that's fine. And starting to settle in. You'll start to wiggle the fingers and the toes. Reach the arms overhead, stretching out through the legs. Start to walk the feet in, bending the legs, and you'll roll over onto your right side, cradling the head and the arm. Keeping the eyes closed. Then using the left hand, press yourself up to an easy cross-legged seat, coming into your meditation seat to close your practice. Sitting up tall. And once you find yourself here, if you feel like you're prepped for your meditation and you want to keep going, feel free to turn this off, continue to go into your meditation and end your practice whenever you'd like. If you're ready to go and want to close practice with me, stay with me. Hands come together right in front of you. Bow the head, maintaining the lift of the chest. Take a moment to honor and acknowledge your heart and spirit, as well as everyone around you. Bring the head back up, blink open the eyes. Namaste. Thanks so much for allowing me to guide you through your yin practice today. Hope it was what you needed, and I'll see you next time.